Karate Illuminati. This is Noah, and today we are going to be going over pivoting on the ball of the foot versus the heel of the foot. This is a topic that's come up a lot lately across a number of different forums and chat rooms and things like that. And actually, a number of my friends have addressed these points from their own perspectives in their own videos. But I'm going to focus specifically on whether you pivot on the ball of the foot or heel of the foot when you are trying to drive a strike forward in zenkutsu-dachi. That's something that has been brought up a number of times outside of the karate world that I've been seeing lately, so I wanted to specifically address that point. One of the things that gets brought up is that in your zenkutsu-dachi, this very common stance throughout your kata and your basics, this back foot remains planted flat on the ground. Now, one of the things that non-karate martial artists have pointed out is that when you throw your punch this way, with this being planted on the floor, you don't have as much power and you don't have as much reach. Now, most karate people would refute that, saying no, because it's planted, you're driving off the ground with your heel, you are more connected to the ground and therefore you hit harder. There are a number of different ways to look at this particular stance and to sort of analyze what you're trying to accomplish. From my perspective, when you are looking at striking forward in this front stance, that back foot has to do different things depending on what you're trying to accomplish. Now, if you look at any sport fighting, you will very rarely see a strike thrown this way with that back foot planted flat on the ground like this if they are out at a distance. And there's a reason for that. Having that foot planted this way does make it very difficult for you to step forward if you need to. It doesn't have the same forward drive. And that's because it's lacking this extra angle that you have with your foot. It doesn't have the ability to use your calf muscle to push you forward, the same way you would if you were running. But what it does do by keeping you closer to the ground is give you a more solid base. You see a lot more strikes and other techniques being utilized in this stance with the heel down when they're in contact with an opponent. Meaning, the opponent can affect my structure. If I'm sparring with somebody and they're over here, and I need to close distance, well, it makes sense for me to be driving in a way that is similar to running so that I can move forward. On the other hand, if they're right on top of me, we're in close, I can affect my opponent's balance and my opponent can affect mine. As soon as I come up on this ball of the foot when they're in contact with me, I don't have the same structure and the same balance that I would have if I maintain this solid connection to the floor. That's why you don't see in old kata these types of strikes with the heel off the ground. They're not intended for use at that longer range. They're meant for use against close contact with an opponent. So they're concerned more about maintaining your structure and your balance when someone is in contact with you. If they're right on top of me and I throw a strike this way, this is going to keep me in a much more stable position than this will. But I would argue that it does limit your power. And the reason for that is having this heel on the ground, you can pivot your hips up to a certain point, depending on the flexibility of your hips. And that means that you can move your body rotationally into your strike up to a certain point. But if you look at this, as soon as I lift and drive on the ball of the foot, my fist moves even further forward, my hip moves even further forward. So just looking at it from the most basic perspective possible, pivoting into your punch on the ball of your foot actually puts more of your body weight in the direction of your strike. So it would follow that that's going to hit harder than a strike that is stopped sooner. That doesn't necessarily mean that you always need that extra reach and that extra power, especially at close range, where you need to maintain that solid base and make sure that you don't get knocked over. But it is something to consider. If you want to hit hard, you can hit hard this way with the heel planted, but you will hit harder as soon as you pivot up and drive on the ball of your foot. Now, one other thing that people bring up about this is that if you are standing in some other position, for example, shorin-ryu, and you pivot into your front stance, if you pivot on the heel, you move forward, and if you pivot on the ball of the foot, you move backward, because your heel is the base of your leg. So by moving on the ball of your foot, you are actually moving your body weight back. Now, this is a very true point. If you are in one position and you want to maintain having your feet flat on the ground, if I pivot on the ball of my foot to try and drive forward, I am going to be losing half my power, because part of me is going backward while the rest of me is trying to go forward. While pivoting on the heel is going to drive my entire body forward. But as I mentioned, that is for keeping your feet flat on the floor. That's why you're looking at that from a close range fighting perspective. If I wanted to transition and pivot on the ball of my foot to drive forward, that heel has to come up because I need to be driving my weight forward. And that will ensure that I don't move my body weight backward anymore. But keeping my feet flat on the floor, pivoting, is going to lose me power. So there are a couple different ways to look at that pivot and that drive, and there's multiple ways to apply them. So you need to be aware of all of those things and evaluate them on their merits to determine what fits your karate best.